He sang Jingle Bells on my porch for 10 minutes. But when I shut the door, he started singing from my backyard. I still remember the exact moment the singing stopped. Not because the house finally fell silent, but because something far worse replaced it. The sound of feet crunching through fresh snow, slow, deliberate, and far too close to my bedroom window. That night wasn't just unusual. It was the first time in all my 33 years I understood what it truly felt like to be hunted in my own home. If you had told me a stranger would stand in my backyard, looking up at me while whispering the chorus of a Christmas song, I would have laughed at the absurdity. But it happened, and it was only the beginning. Before we dive into the full story, if you enjoy real-life Christmas horror stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel. It helps us keep bringing you these true and chilling experiences. My name is Ethan, and this happened just last December, in a quiet neighborhood in upstate New York, where the cold seems to settle so deeply into the ground that even time feels frozen. I'd lived there for 6 years, long enough to appreciate the serene winters and the distance between houses. Most neighbors spent the holidays traveling, visiting extended family, escaping the isolation that December always brought to our block. But that year, I stayed behind. My girlfriend, Rachel, went to visit her parents in Vermont. I couldn't go because of a tight deadline at work, and at first, the idea of having an entire week to myself felt peaceful. A little lonely, maybe, but peaceful. I told myself I'd catch up on sleep, rewatch some old shows, and give myself permission to slow down. I didn't realize the silence I was craving would turn against me. On my second night alone, I finished work around 6 and realized the sun had already vanished behind a thick layer of snow clouds. It had been snowing on and off all day, a gentle kind of snowfall, soft and steady, until everything was covered in a clean white sheet. I was the only house on my entire street with lights on. I didn't think much of it. I actually liked the quiet isolation, or at least I thought I did. Inside, I tried to make dinner an attempt that mostly involved overcooking chicken and undercooking pasta, but it was warm, and it made the house feel lived in. The television hummed faintly in the background, not loud enough to distract me, just loud enough to remind me I wasn't completely alone. I ate at the kitchen table, half reading, half listening to some holiday movie playing on the TV. It was supposed to be comforting. Then I heard singing. At first, it was faint, a soft, almost whisper-like voice drifting through the cold. I paused, waiting to hear it again. When I did, I muted the TV. The sound was clearer now, a man's voice singing Jingle Bells, off-key, slow, dragging the melody into something eerie rather than joyful. Children sometimes caroled around the neighborhood this time of year, but this wasn't the voice of a child. This sounded like a grown adult, and it was close. I walked toward the front door, each step making the singing a little louder. By the time I reached the door, the voice was unmistakably right on my front porch. Something about that was wrong. Even as my hand reached for the doorknob, I felt a tightening in my stomach, a warning that I wasn't supposed to ignore. But logic stepped in. It's probably just someone spreading Christmas cheer, or maybe a neighbor's friend. That's what I told myself. I opened the door. The porch light flickered once, and then steadied, illuminating a man standing directly in front of me. He must have been around 35. No hat, a thin coat that wouldn't keep anyone warm, his hair damp from snow. But the strangest thing wasn't that he was underdressed or alone. It was that he didn't acknowledge me at all. He kept singing, staring down at my welcome mat as if he was reading the lyrics from it. I forced a small smile, confused, but polite. He didn't look dangerous. If anything, he looked lost or disconnected. Maybe he had special needs. Maybe he was cold and disoriented. Maybe he needed help. I wasn't afraid yet. Not really. But when the song finished, he didn't stop. He didn't say hello or ask for anything. He just inhaled deeply and started singing Jingle Bells all over again, this time lifting his head until his eyes locked directly onto mine. That was when the unease became something sharper. He didn't blink. His expression didn't change. He just sang, every word slow and off-key, the flat notes landing heavy in the cold night air. I checked my phone. 4 minutes had passed, then 6. He kept looping the song like he was stuck inside it. Finally, I whispered a soft, "Thanks," and slowly closed the door. The singing didn't pause, didn't hitch. It just kept going. I sat back at the table, pretending to eat, but with every word of that song drifting through the door, my appetite vanished. After 10 minutes, the singing suddenly stopped. The silence hit so abruptly, it made my heartbeat spike. I got up and peeked through the front window, expecting to see him leaving, heading down the street, maybe relieved he had moved on, but he hadn't left. He was standing at the very end of my driveway now, turned toward the house, still and silent, just watching. I opened the door a crack and told him he needed to leave, that this was private property. His expression didn't change. He didn't move. I told him I'd call the police. Still nothing. At this point, fear finally took hold. Not a dramatic terror, but an instinctive chill, the kind your body feels before your mind understands. Something was wrong with him, something I couldn't define. I locked the door and went upstairs, telling myself I needed space, distance. My bedroom felt safer. I changed into more comfortable clothes and tried to read to calm down. 20 minutes later, I heard singing again, but this time, it wasn't coming from the front porch. It was coming from behind the house. The same voice, the same song, the same unsettling pace. I rushed to the window and looked down into the backyard. There he was, standing directly beneath my window, staring up at me, mouth open, singing to me like I was the only audience he'd ever needed. The snow around his feet was untouched, except for his footprints leading straight toward my house. I slid open the window and yelled that I was calling the police. The singing stopped instantly. For a moment, everything was still. Then, without warning, he lunged into a sprint toward the back door, disappearing under the overhang. That's when the screaming began, raw, inhuman, a sound so violent it vibrated through the walls. He threw his body against the door, tried ripping the doorknob, kicking, slamming, screaming, like he was possessed. I grabbed my phone and called 911, retreating into my closet with a baseball bat in my other hand. Even the operator told me to stay hidden, because it was clear this wasn't someone harmless. The banging went on until it stopped abruptly, leaving the house drowned in a silence so heavy it almost felt physical. When the police arrived, the back door was still locked. The man was gone. Only footprints remained, leading off into the woods behind my property. The officers told me people act strangely around the holidays, that I should just keep my doors locked. But that night changed something in me. I realized solitude can turn dangerous when the wrong person notices you're alone. And even now, when snow starts falling each December, I find myself checking the back door twice, then 3 times, just to be sure. Because the worst part wasn't the singing. It was the moment I realized he hadn't come for help. He had come for me. I thought he was helping me find my parents, until he tried to shove me toward the emergency exit. I was 16 the first time I finally said the story out loud, really said it. Not the quick version I used to tell myself so I wouldn't have nightmares. It took me 10 years to admit that the night I almost disappeared began as one of the happiest nights of my childhood. And maybe that's what makes it so difficult to forget. Danger doesn't always show up in the dark. Sometimes it finds you under bright arena lights with thousands of people around, and you still end up more alone than you've ever been in your life. My name is Lucas, and when I was 6 years old, I almost got taken from an NBA arena during the holiday season. I didn't understand it then. Now, Looking back as a teenager, the details feel clearer, sharper, like my mind finally figured out which moments mattered. It started the week between Christmas and New Year's, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, where the holiday lights stretch across neighborhoods like they're stitched into the sky. That year was special. My parents surprised me with tickets to 2 Mavericks games. It was supposed to be the highlight of my winter, and for a while, it was. The first game had been incredible close score, cheering crowd, the arena glowing with that electric blue light. I remember everything feeling bigger than life. But the second game, the one on December 30th, felt different the moment we walked through the doors. The arena was crowded, louder than usual, filled with traveling families and holiday visitors. The air smelled like popcorn and cold winter jackets. People buzzed with energy, almost enough to drown out the uneasy feeling I felt without knowing why. We had seats farther up this time, not too far from the concourse level. I didn't understand the difference, but I remember the view felt less magical. During halftime, my dad decided he wanted different food than what was near our section and left to grab something from another vendor. My older brother stayed behind with me in line at the concession stand. Inside that arena, everything looked safe. Everything felt safe. Bright lights, security guards everywhere, families, kids, laughter echoing from every direction. At 6 years old, I believed danger lived only in dark alleys and scary movies. Not here. Definitely not here. While my brother waited to pay, I wandered only a few steps away to throw away the wrapper from the candy he'd bought me earlier. The trash can was maybe 30 feet from him. I could still see him clearly. I wasn't sneaking off. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just being a kid. That was when a tall man stepped toward me. He looked normal enough, mid-40s. White, clean-shaven, dressed in a heavy jacket like everyone else. Nothing about him screamed danger. His voice was calm, deep, steady. He asked if I was lost. I told him no, because I wasn't. My family was right there. But he shook his head like he didn't believe me and said he didn't see any adults around. He crouched down to my level, smiled warmly, and told me he was going to help me find my parents. At 6 years old, the words help and adult feel synonymous. So when he took my hand, I let him. I remember the grip now tight, deliberate, confident in a way a stranger's hand should never feel. He led me toward the stairs going up to the higher levels of the arena. The noise from the crowd faded slightly with each step. He told me we were heading to the intercom booth so they could announce my name and find my parents quicker. He made it sound logical, helpful, like something a good person would do. But then he started looking over his shoulder. Not once, not twice, constantly, scanning, watching. His hand didn't loosen. It tightened. Now, at 16, I can look back and recognize the signs. But at 6, all I had was a feeling, an instinct pressing like cold fingers at the back of my neck. I kept glancing behind me, hoping to see my dad or my brother. Instead, I saw people laughing, eating, cheering. So many adults. None of them looking at me. None of them noticing anything was wrong. When we reached the upper level, he stopped near the emergency stairwell door. That's when his voice changed. Not the tone, but the rhythm. Too fast, too eager. He said the intercom was inside. The door didn't look like it led to an office. It looked like it led somewhere people weren't supposed to go. I hesitated. For the first time since he approached me, his smile faded. That was the moment my instincts screamed loud enough for me to hear them. He loosened his grip for just a second while checking his phone, maybe making sure no one was watching. That was all I needed. I tore my hand out of his and ran fast, faster than my legs had ever moved in my life. I didn't look back. I didn't care if I tripped or fell. I just ran toward the noise of the crowd, toward the arena lights, toward safety. When I finally found my brother, he was irritated. He didn't tell my parents because he didn't want to get in trouble. I didn't tell them because I didn't want them to think I'd done something wrong. Looking back now, that silence still bothers me. We left the arena after the Mavericks won. My parents noticed I was quiet, but they assumed I was tired, and I would have convinced myself of that too, if not for the truck. As we pulled onto the freeway, headlights suddenly flooded the back window. A loud horn blared. I turned around, and the breath left my lungs. The same man was driving a truck behind us, staring at me from the driver's seat. There were silhouettes in the passenger seats, 3, maybe 4. I couldn't see faces, only dark shapes watching. My parents yelled at them to back off. The men didn't move, didn't react, just stayed beside us, staring. Eventually, after a few terrifying minutes, they sped off onto another exit. My parents never knew what happened. I didn't tell them that night, not when we got home, not the day after, not for years. But the story didn't end there. Later that night, long after my parents went to bed, I woke up to a bright flashing light against my bedroom window. Not headlights, a flashlight. The beam moved slowly, like someone was scanning the room. My heart dropped. I stepped toward the window, thinking maybe it was Santa or a neighbor or someone harmless. But it was him, standing in our backyard, shining the light into my room. I screamed. My parents rushed outside, searched the yard, found nothing. They didn't believe me, thought it was a car passing by, a trick of light. I wanted to believe that too, but I couldn't forget his face. A few nights later, on New Year's Eve, there was a knock at our front door. My parents answered, confused. I didn't go near it. I recognized the voice from across the house. My parents insisted it was a man handing out flyers for a missing dog. They didn't believe me when I told them. They didn't want to believe me. A year later, almost to the exact date, someone left a note tapped onto my window. The handwriting was jagged and uneven. It read, "This new year, you'll meet me again." I showed my parents. They filed a report. Nothing came of it. I never went back to another NBA game. Not until now, at 16, when I'm finally considering going again. But the truth is, I still think about those arena lights, how safe they seemed, and how close I came to never walking back out of them. When we reached the truck, my wife screamed our tires had been slashed, and 3 figures were standing in the tree line watching us. I used to think the mountains were the safest place on earth, quiet, untouched, peaceful in a way that made you forget the world's problems the moment you stepped into the trees. For years, my wife Anna and I drove up north every December to find a real Christmas tree. It was our tradition, something pure and grounding. But 10 years ago, that tradition ended forever. Not because of the cold, or the long drive, or even the rough terrain. It ended because of the 3 figures who watched us from between the pines, people who moved with such unsettling patience that I still wake up sometimes convinced they're standing outside our bedroom window. My name is Mark, and this is the story of the Christmas tree trip that nearly tore my family away from me. It was early December. Snow layered thick across the mountains, untouched and sparkling beneath a fading afternoon sky. Our 7-year-old son, Leo, was in the back seat, humming excitedly, clutching the little red thermos of hot cocoa Anna made for him. The air smelled like winter, the kind of crisp, clean cold that makes you breathe a little deeper. It was supposed to be a perfect family day, a memory we'd look back on for years, and now we do. Just not in the way we expected. We drove up winding roads for nearly an hour before reaching the remote clearing Anna had found online. It wasn't a tourist spot or a tree farm, just a quiet patch of wilderness where cutting a tree wasn't exactly legal. But everyone knew people did it anyway, if they were respectful. There were no other cars, no families bundled in scarves, no laughter echoing through the trees. That should have been the first sign that something was off. But when you're trying to make your kid happy, You ignore little things like that. The clearing was lit only by a few old lampposts scattered around the parking area, their light barely stretching beyond the first line of trees. It wasn't pitch black, but it was dim, enough that you felt the darkness waiting just a few steps ahead. Leo jumped out of the truck the second we parked, scooping snow into clumsy snowballs and throwing them at my legs. His laughter echoed through the cold air, pure and bright. Moments like that make everything feel worth it. You cling to them, even when something inside you whispers that the air feels strange, heavy, too quiet. We grabbed the flashlights, the small hand saw, and the old axe I'd brought for effect more than necessity. Then we started up the unmarked path through the trees. The deeper we walked, the more the clearing disappeared behind us. The snow muffled all sound. Even our footsteps felt swallowed by it. About 10 minutes in, we found a cluster of tall, full pines that looked perfect. Leo raced around them, deciding which one was the Christmas winner. Anna moved closer to me and whispered that she felt uneasy, a heaviness in her chest, like someone was watching us. I wasn't about to scare our son, so I brushed it off. But truthfully, I'd felt it too, the sense that we weren't alone. Then I heard footsteps, soft, slow, crunching snow, only about 20 feet behind us. When I turned, a man stood on the path. He was thin, dressed in clothes far too light for the weather, a windbreaker instead of a winter coat, bare hands turning red from the cold. His face looked pale, almost gray, but it was the smile that froze me, too wide, too forced, like he practiced it in a mirror and still didn't get it right. "You folks here for a tree?" he asked, his voice deep but strangely airy, like he hadn't spoken in days. Before I could respond, Leo shouted, "Yes!" with excitement. That spike of panic nearly knocked the breath out of me. I didn't want this man knowing anything about us, not even the truth. Anna spoke quickly, saying we were just hiking. The man stepped closer anyway, that unsettling smile stretching further. He said not to worry, he wasn't a ranger. Somehow, the way he said it made my heart beat faster, like he knew exactly what we were thinking. We started walking back toward the main path, moving slow but steady. I didn't want to run. Running felt like a trigger, a spark, a signal that could turn curiosity into pursuit. But every time I glanced behind us, the man was a little closer. His steps didn't sound hurried. They were slow, dragging through the snow, but he covered distance like he was gliding instead of walking. I gripped the axe tighter. I hated how much comfort it brought me. I'm not a violent person, and yet holding that wooden handle grounded me, made me feel like I had some control. Anna whispered that when we saw the truck, we needed to run. When the clearing finally came into view, she grabbed Leo, lifting him into her arms and sprinting ahead. I stopped for 1 second, one instinctive second, to block the path and stare the man down. He froze beneath one of the lampposts, hands raised halfway in a gesture that wasn't comforting at all. And then he said something I still don't fully understand. "Get back to your truck now. Quickly." He said it like a warning, or a command. I had no idea which one it was, and neither answer made sense. When I reached the truck, Anna was pale and shaking. Both right side tires were slashed. Deep cuts, deliberate, no question about what caused them. Leo sat inside the truck, wide-eyed and silent. Anna tried calling 911, but her signal kept dropping. She had to walk around the parking area to find a sliver of reception. She never went far, but even watching her take those few steps away made my chest tighten. Then she screamed. I spun toward the tree line and saw them. Not one man, 3, standing just beyond the glow of the lamps, unmoving, watching us. I counted their silhouettes, but the darkness made them blend together. 2 of them stepped forward, slowly, methodically, without a word. I told the operator what I saw, but her voice was breaking up. Still, I heard the urgency as she asked if I had any weapons. When I said I had an axe, she paused for a moment that chilled me, then told me to protect my family if necessary. No operator says that unless the situation is dire. The call dropped completely. My heart pounded so hard it echoed in my ears. Anna pulled Leo close, whispering to him, trying to keep him calm. I locked the truck again, even though the doors were already locked. My grip tightened around the axe. The two figures drew nearer, hands raised like they were trying to look non-threatening. But there was nothing non-threatening about the way they moved, or the way they ignored our pleas to stay back. Then, suddenly, they stopped. Both turned sharply and ran. It took me a second to understand why. Then I heard the sirens. The police SUV sped into the clearing, spotlights scanning the trees. I flashed our truck lights until the beams settled on us. Officers jumped out immediately, moving with purpose, their flashlights cutting through the dark like sharp white blades. Another unit arrived within minutes. The three figures were gone, but their footprints stretched deep into the woods, leading toward a direction the officers didn't want to follow in the dark. Eventually, the tow truck came, and the police stayed with us until every trace of danger was gone, at least physically, but the emotional residue lingered. On the silent drive home, none of us spoke. Leo eventually fell asleep, but even in sleep, he clung to Anna's arm like letting go meant losing us. Anna kept staring out the window, scanning the tree lines as they blurred past. That night changed something in me, something fundamental. The woods used to make me feel alive. Now, they make me feel watched. Years later, I still wonder how long those people had been observing us, how far into the trees they'd been hiding before we noticed, how much worse it could have ended if any of us had made one wrong decision. We never went back. Not once. And every December, when families post pictures of their perfect Christmas trees cut fresh from the mountains, I hope they understand one thing. The forest doesn't care if you're there to make memories, but the people hiding inside it might. He asked if I was home alone. Then, he tried the doorknob. I used to love Christmas lights. The warm glow, the soft flicker across snowy yards, the gentle sense of safety they brought to the neighborhood. But the night I turned 9 years old, I learned something no kid should ever have to learn, that sometimes the monsters you're warned about don't hide under your bed or in your closet. Sometimes they stand right at your front door wearing a red suit and a white beard, waiting for you to trust them. My name is Noah, and this is the night I realized Christmas can be the most dangerous time of the year. It happened a few days before Christmas. My parents had errands to run that evening. My dad working late, my mom rushing to grab last-minute groceries for the holiday dinner. They weren't gone long, and normally, I wasn't scared being home alone. At almost 9, I was proud to be trusted, proud to sit by the fireplace watching Christmas movies with a plate of cookies and a mug of hot chocolate like some tiny grown-up. The house glowed with holiday decorations, lights twinkling softly along the windows, and the trees shimmering from across the room. Outside, the sky had already turned dark, though it wasn't that late. Winter nights fall quickly in our neighborhood. The streetlights created long, stretching shadows across the quiet road, houses blinking with multicolored lights. It was peaceful, the kind of evening parents always imagine is safe for their kids. Then the doorbell rang. At first, I ignored it. My mom had told me many times, don't answer the door when you're alone, ever. That rule echoed in my head like a warning bell. But curiosity is strong when you're 9, and something about the timing felt odd. My parents never rang the bell, but who else would come by this late? I walked quietly to the front door and peered through the peephole. A man stood on the porch wearing a full Santa Claus suit, not the cheap kind either. This wasn't some flimsy costume. The coat was plush, deep red, thick, almost authentic looking. The beard was full and white, the hat sitting perfectly on his head. But the longer I stared, the more wrong it felt. He wasn't holding presents, or a sack, or candy canes. He had a clipboard, just a blank clipboard, held against his chest like he was trying to look official. Most alarming of all was how close he stood to the door. Too close. If I opened it even an inch, he could have reached inside. He didn't move, didn't wave, didn't smile. When I whispered, "Who is it?" his head shifted slightly, as if he were trying to find the source of my voice through the peephole. Then he responded with a hoarse, low, "Ho, ho, ho," followed by, "I'm Santa. I have presents for you. Open the door, buddy." At 9, I no longer believed in Santa, but I knew something even more important. Strangers don't ask kids to open the door, especially not when they're alone. I told him to go away, trying to sound brave, but my voice cracked. He paused, then asked softly, "Are you home alone? Are you home alone? A. My heart sank. That question wasn't friendly. It didn't feel like curiosity. It felt like he was confirming something, checking whether he had time, whether there was anyone nearby who could stop him. Something inside me rang louder than the doorbell ever could. I stepped back from the door instantly, adrenaline kicking hard, urging me to get away. I moved to the living room and sat behind the couch, hugging a pillow, trying to convince myself that locking the door was enough, that he'd walk away, just like normal people do. But then the doorknob twisted. Once, twice, slow, testing, careful. I wanted to scream, but shock held my throat shut. I realized then that he had no intention of leaving, not until he knew for certain whether I was truly alone. After a moment of silence, I heard something else. Footsteps, but not from the front porch, from the back of the house. The second doorknob, the one on the old, weaker back door, turned sharply. Someone was trying it with more force this time. The footsteps had crossed the entire house in seconds, which meant he wasn't just checking, he was circling. Fast and intentional. I ran into the kitchen, grabbed the phone, and dialed my mom. I didn't filter my words or hide my fear. "Mom, someone's trying to get in. He's dressed like Santa. He tried the front door and he's at the back door now." Her voice changed instantly. Gone was the typical comfort. She sounded sharp, terrified, focused. She told me she was coming home right away and that I was not to open any door under any circumstance. She told me to stay hidden, curtains closed, lights off, so I crawled behind the couch in the living room, exactly where she said to stay. From there, I could only hear small sounds, the crunch of snow, beneath slow, deliberate footsteps outside, a faint tapping on windows, or perhaps on the walls. Every few seconds, I imagined the doorknob turning again, imagined a shadow passing by the blinds. But after a while, everything went quiet, completely silent. Minutes later, I heard a familiar sound, the squeak of my mom's brakes as she pulled into the driveway. The front door unlocked and slammed open. She called my name, and I ran to her so fast I nearly tripped. She held 2 grocery bags in one hand and wrapped the other arm around me tightly. She stepped outside again to check the porch and said she saw a man in a Santa suit walking down the street. When she shouted at him, he hurried away, telling her he was going door to door asking for donations. She didn't believe him for a second. Neither did I. We called the police. A report was filed. Officers said they'd patrol the neighborhood, and they did for a few nights. Neighbors later mentioned someone matching that description had knocked on their doors too, claiming his cousin's dog was missing, holding the same clipboard. But none of them had a child home alone. I tried to forget the incident. I wanted to believe it was over, but it wasn't. A year later, almost to the exact day on New Year's Eve, I woke up to a soft tapping at my bedroom window. I thought maybe it was a branch, maybe the wind. But when I opened the curtains, there was a single piece of paper stuck to the glass. The handwriting was shaky, uneven, almost frantic. It read, "This new year, I'll see you again." I screamed for my parents. They called the police again. Another report. Nothing came of it. Now, even years later, I still close my curtains at sunset. I still check the locks twice, sometimes 3 times. And whenever I see Santa decorations or hear bells ringing in December, the memory hits me all over again. Not every Santa comes with gifts. Some come with intentions you don't want to understand. When you look at these 4 stories side by side, the man singing in the snow, the stranger in the arena, the silent shadows in the woods, and the Santa at the wrong door, there's something they all have in common. None of the people in these stories were looking for trouble. None of them did anything wrong. They were just living their lives, celebrating the holidays, trying to make memories with the people they love. And yet, danger found them anyway. That's the part that stays with me long after the stories end. Because the truth is, horror doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it stands just outside the glow of the porch light, waiting for you to dismiss your instincts just long enough for something irreversible to happen. And sometimes it hides behind the very things we associate with safety carols, family events, Christmas trees, even Santa Claus. But there's something else. These stories show something just as important, if not more. Every one of these people listened to the quiet voice inside them. That voice we often ignore. The instinct that tells you something is wrong even when you can't explain it. The feeling that makes you double-check a lock, leave a party early, call someone back into the room, or hold your child just a little closer. The part of you that whispers when danger smiles. And listening to that voice saved them. In a way, these stories aren't just about fear. They're about survival, about resilience, about awareness, about choosing to value your intuition over politeness, about protecting the people you care about even when you don't fully understand why your heart is telling you to move, to run, to hide, to act. The holidays are supposed to be a time of warmth and comfort. But the world doesn't change just because we hang up lights and pour hot chocolate. What does change is the way we prepare, the way we watch out for ourselves and for each other, the way we refuse to let the darkness take advantage of our celebrations. If these stories leave you with anything, let it be this. Trust yourself, trust your instincts, check the locks, stay aware, and most importantly, never apologize for taking your safety seriously. The people in these stories didn't owe anyone politeness. They owed themselves survival. And that's exactly what they chose. So as the snow falls and the year winds down, remember that even in the darkest moments, you have the strength to protect yourself. You have the awareness to recognize danger, and you have the courage to do what it takes to get home safely. Because sometimes, the scariest stories remind us of the simplest truth. The world can be unpredictable, but we are stronger than we think. Stay safe, stay aware, and may your holidays be peaceful and nothing like what you heard tonight.